Gundam.tk presents Master Grade Age-1 Titus. Hey, what's up again, everybody? It's Robert184, 2 hours to bees from GundamReviews.net, and I've taken a look at the Master Grade Age-1 Titus here over a couple parts. You've seen everything from the unbox to the plates to the mobile suit itself, and now I've compiled a list of the good and bad things, so let's get right to it so that you can make your own call as to whether this is a purchase or not for you. Starting with him lamenting, why, oh why was I not made perfectly? And let's start at the bottom and work our way up with some of the problems with this guy. First of all, the ankles are going to be a very unique design, and that's a double-edged sword because sometimes that's a good thing and sometimes it's a bad thing. It worked really well with the high grade. I'd say it works with the master grade, but it's going to be a little bit more awkward here with just some loose parts all over the place, and it's not going to fill you with confidence. However, at the end of the day, it is still going to be able to pull off a lot of poses, and I think that's important. It's also going to have issues here, like the fact that these ankle guards are going to be very, very loose when you examine them separately. These white parts, if they get separated, are going to show off some of the gray, and it's not necessarily a good thing there for the inner frame. Now, as you work your way up here, you're going to see a few strange things, like when you split the knee, there's a lot of gray that's exposed, and we've seen that they've had pistons inside, they've had all sorts of funny stuff inside. That's all going to sort of distract from the fact that all of a sudden you've exposed a big chunk of inner frame. With this one, they don't really do anything for that except to have that little three-pointed, and not triangle, but you get the idea, that red piece that's put on the front there. When you've got effect parts in there, you're not even going to be looking at the gray, but without it, every once in a while you can have the red part in the wrong part, and it's just not going to line up all that well. Once you move on to the waist and the hips, every once in a while things are not going to line up because it has the moving points on the hips, and especially with the Titus, you're supposed to do a lot of different poses. It can be a little tricky to get it symmetrical, but then again, you can do so much with it that it's a happy trade-off. Where you start to get into bigger issues, though, is up on the shoulders, starting with the fact that these red parts up here, it's great, I think, that they're molded in red instead of blue, so it just sets it apart from the Age-1 Normal and Sparrow. However, it is going to pop off. It popped off 2 times on me in the middle of just making this review. And when you work your way out to the shoulders, you're going to have another set of problems, including the fact that you're not going to have a free range of rotation all the time. You're going to have to be a little bit careful with it. You're going to have to sort of jar it loose so that you'll be able to rotate it around. And as I mentioned in my previous MS parts, when you take a look at the high grade and you take this and you just split it apart, when you do that, you're going to have a whole bunch, it's not all that easy here at the moment, without some nails, but if I go and do that properly, top and bottom, then you're going to have a nice little gray chunk there in the middle. Whereas with the master grade, you're going to have these parts up here, and then they're going to look hollow, sadly. Now, on the other hand, you're going to have a million things that move around. They can actually rotate within a set frame, but sometimes the simplicity of something like the high grade is just going to make the master grade look a little bit overly complicated, and not necessarily necessarily the best option. Also, with the lariats, you got to be careful popping the wrists on and off. Every once in a while that you're not going to break anything when you deal with the wrists. And moving on to the hands, people are going to hate these 4 solid fingers. I'm actually sort of happy with them. These Kung Fu ones are not the most exciting. The grappling ones are good because they're at interesting angles. The fists, they look just right. But at the end of the day, when you've got a big 18-meter Gundam in 1/100th scale, you expect to be able to move the fingers around at least 3-finger trigger finger split, if not bigger with this guy. Because he is oversized hands, you'd think that they could get more articulation in, not less. So before this guy gets too angry, I might as well move on to the good stuff. So let's kick things off with just a little bit of a preface in that when I first saw the Titus, when I saw the MS revealed at the beginning of Age, when they were talking about the 2 different wears, and yes, we've seen this before in a lot of different Japanese TV shows, but I've got to say that I thought the Titus was the worst of the bunch because it just looked too cartoony, too cheesy, too over the top. However, the high grade ended up being almost one of my Gundams of the year last year, just because of the sheer number of things you can do with it, and the master grade, as you can probably guess from seeing the MS part of this review, is going to follow along in the same lines. The positives, the ankles seem wonky, and yet they seem to work. I've seen better designed ankles that don't work, and this one, which just doesn't seem that well designed, for whatever reason, it has worked 8 times out of 10, so that's not that bad. The knees, again, they're going to work. They're going to look great when they're thrusting forward to put those energy spikes into somebody's face up there. The waist is unique enough to be a lot of fun. The shoulders, they do have those millions of points of articulation so that you can move them all over the place thanks to both the frame and the fact that you're going to be able to move those around. The elbows, the 135 is enough. And when you take a look at these effect parts, the effect parts I thought were a little bit small compared to the high grade, where it just seems a little bit more, they're just going to be meidatsu or standing out. And what happens is with this guy, they're actually going to be just the right size, I'd say, in terms of proportions. Starting with the beam lariats, where you're going to have that awesome bit that they're actually removed from the body, and you're just going to have energy blasting outwards, which is going to form the lariat before Flitz goes ahead and uses that. And then when you've got them coming out of the shoulders, it's sort of cool that you can change the angles, and I'd imagine that you could use your imagination. You should have them all going out away from each other, sort of 45 degrees if you think of it that way. But what you could do is actually have them pointed in the same direction and actually use that as part of the pose. If he was doing an old shoulder bolt Gundam or Maxter style into somebody, why not actually have them lined up where it's going to go? Now that's helped with the overall articulation of the kit, that the waist is going to get wherever you want it to go. The chest section is going to be great, not to mention that fantastic cockpit which follows through from the Age-1, and the head is going to look good no matter which way you put it. Speaking of positives, the head, I went with the regular seals here as opposed to the clear parts, which I kept for the Age-1 normal. And actually, I'm going to give the edge to the seals that you're seeing here with the Titus. A little bit surprising, because usually the fact that they're going to give you clear parts, you should use them, or so I'd figure. But the regular ones are just going to stand out more in terms of both the marks, the A on the top of the head for the camera lens and for the eyes. But overall, just the fact that this guy, no matter what pose you do with him, as long as you get the waist into the right position, he's going to look fantastic. The high grade, if you go back to something like Seed, you're talking about things with massive backpacks, and the backpacks is the appeal to pretty much everything we saw in Seed and Seed Destiny. When I saw the Titus with no weapons whatsoever except for these effect parts, and yet this guy is more fun to pose than I'd say, more fun than the real grade Freedom, more fun than pretty much anything. There's nothing you can't do with the high grade, and the master grade is going to do just as much and look impressive wherever you get there. And at the end of the day, when you've got a fun build and you've got a fun combination of poses that you can do at the end, despite the fact that it is seemingly simplistic, you can guess that my final verdict is going to be overwhelmingly positive. I didn't think that the high grade was going to be as good as it was, and it certainly exceeded my expectations, and the master grade did the same thing. I'm a big fan of the master grade Age-1 normal, but when I see the two of them beside each other with a shield and a Dodds rifle and just its overall plain appearance, although classic at the same time, the Titus, no matter what pose you put him in, if you put him on your shelf, is going to draw everybody's eyes. In no small part thanks to the colors, but also to the effect parts, but also just to the fact that it's dynamic. And that's something for somebody like me who's very unimaginative when it comes to posing. The fact that they've got so many examples all over the place, you can't help but make this guy look good. And because every pose that you put him in looks good, well then he's just going to be a lot of fun to put together. So combine a good build with a good end result. And of course, I'm going to say that this, who knows, it could be on one of my lists for top kits of this year when we get to the year-end December, January. So on to future speculation, which is always fun. We've already got an advanced grade and a high grade that you can check out. And part of the Age-1 SD BB Senshi, you also do get the Titus armor in there. You'd have to buy a couple if you want to get all the sets of effect parts, but nonetheless, one is certainly good enough. However, at the end of the day, could we be getting any more? 1/100th non-grade is off the table, 1/60th seems to be dead, and yet at the same time I can't help but think that this would be the perfect kind of Gundam to come out in 1/60th. You saw with the Strike Gundam that they had both the regular version and then the one with all three packs. You can imagine that they would have an Age-1 normal or one with all three of the packs or sold separately. Anyway, I could just see there being a very attractive price point for the 6,000 yen with no inner frame the way they did that. We've got the 1/48th, which has certainly taken over from 1/60th or so it seems since the Exia came out, but the fact that they've already moved on to Age-2 with no sign of a Sparrow or Titus just seems to indicate that if you're looking at 8,000 plus a lot more plastic for more additional limbs, that it's probably never going to happen. Perfect grade 1/60th, well who knows, could we get one or three of them? Anyway, I guess Age-3 may just be more popular than the whole bunch. But then again, perfect grades being as far and few between, the odds of us getting a Titus are pretty long when you think about it. What can be said though with absolute certainty is that we are going to be getting all three of the Age-1s in master grade form, so after the normal and the Titus, it's only the Sparrow that we've got to follow up. So anyway, stay tuned for that. I'll have a review because I have been thoroughly enjoying building these master grade 1/100th lead Gundams. I don't know how if I'd be picking them all up if they did have 1/100th counterparts, but in the meantime, I've enjoyed 2 out of the 3, so I can't wait to see how the third one stacks up. In the meantime, why don't you let me know what you think of the master grade Titus, what you think of all these videos, what you think of my verdict, am I out to lunch or am I bang on the money? Of course, it's always great for people to see a whole bunch more opinions down below. Anyway, everybody, thanks for watching very much, and stay tuned for lots more news, reviews, and everything in between. Master Grade Sparrow coming soon. See you, everybody. 3 minutes of negatives, and I didn't mention the fact that there are potential weight issues with the arms. That's something to be careful of, but more importantly, you just gotta be careful because this guy's probably pretty mad that there's 3 minutes of negatives at all.